Good evening and welcome to the League of Women Voters of St. Lucie County Candidate Forum for this midterm election year. I am Sabrina Taylor, the current president. And before we get into the forum, which is why you have made the time to join us this evening, just a few quick reminders. So vote by mail ballots were sent out on September 30th. The last day to request a vote by mail ballot will be October 29th. And the last day to mail that ballot is October 31. You can mail your ballot back or hand deliver it. And if you choose to mail it, please allow 10 to 14 days for delivery. And your ballot must be received in the Supervisory Elections Office no later than 7 p.m. on Election Day, which is November 8th. Early voting begins on Monday, October 24th, and runs through Saturday, September 5th, including Sunday, October 30th, and those hours are from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. There's also an additional early voting day, and that will be Sunday, November 6th at 7 a.m. to ending at 3 p.m. There are 5 locations in St. Lucie County for early voting. As long as you are a resident of St. Lucie County, you can vote anywhere in the county. And so those 5 sites are the Renaissance Business Park, formerly known as the Orange Blossom Business Center, the Zora Neale Hurston Library, the Indian River State College Veterans Center of Excellence, which is a new location, the Mid-Florida Credit Union Event Center, the Paula A. Lewis Library, and the Port St. Lucie Community Center. And so again, you always are welcome to not only visit the League of Women Voters for any voting information, as well as the supervised election website. And one of the other features that we want to make you aware of is Vote 411. Vote for One is a really nice and neat feature. It's a free feature to the public, and it's the lead's contribution to the election process. And so vote411.org is the website. You can go in and put in your address and your city and zip code, and it will customize your ballot. So it will help you plan your vote. No, you do not have to put your name in, but certainly just your address, city and state, and you can customize your ballot, again, to allow you to effectively plan your vote. And last but not least, please make sure that you have a photo and a signature identification. Both are required for this election season. If you'd like to learn more about the League of Women Voters and how to possibly get involved, please visit us at LWVSLC.org. You can also visit us on our Facebook page, a Twitter page, and Instagram as well. And we also have a YouTube page. And so for you all, the voting public, we want to make sure that we are accessible to you in every medium that you utilize. So now on to the forum. Tonight, we will hear from 2 candidates running for the Fort Pierce City Council Commission District 2. The format for tonight's forum will consist of a 90-second introduction by each candidate, followed by a series of questions. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question, and then finally make a 2-minute closing statement. The order of candidates was randomly selected prior to the start of this forum. And just be aware that this is not a debate. So the candidates will make their statements, and then they will answer a series of questions offered by our facilitator, Kara Wyatt. We'll introduce her momentarily. The candidates will be alerted at 30-second juncture to let them know they have only 30 seconds to remaining to answer the question, and then again when their time is up. So our moderator is none other than Kara Wyatt. Carol is the co-owner and operator of local radio stations WPSL Port St. Lucie, WSTU in Stewart, and WJNX in Fort Pierce. She is also the president of WPSL's Christmas Kids of St. Lucie County, and she is also the past president of the Rotary Club of Port St. Lucie. Lastly, Carol is a member of the Port St. Lucie Businesswomen. Carol has many years in broadcasting, including as a reporter in Los Angeles prior to moving to Florida in 1993. We're always honored to have her as our candidate for a moderator yet for another year. And so now, Carol, the line is all yours. Thank you for making the time to join us this evening.
Well, thank you, Sabrina, and welcome to the League of Women Voters of St. Lucie County Candidate Forum. And we thank the members of the League for developing the questions. We thank the candidates for participating, and we thank you for watching and for listening and to inform yourselves before the general election coming up November 8th. Tonight, we're going to look at the race for Fort Pierce City Commission District 2. It is for a term of 4 years, representing roughly the southern half of the city, and you must live in the district to vote for the District City 2 Commission. Our candidates are meeting in a runoff election, Michael Broderick and James Clasby. And we'll begin with opening statements, and we'll then rotate who goes first from then on. 1 minute, 30 seconds, and we'll start with Michael Broderick.
Good evening. I would first like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting a second forum in this election cycle. My name is Mike Broderick, and I am running for City of Fort Pierce District 2 Commission seat that's being vacated by Tom Perona, who is retiring. My wife of 32 years and I have lived in Fort Pierce for over 20 years. We are local business owners. We own several businesses in town. We employ about a dozen people locally within the community. And we look to continue to foster our business relations with the entire city moving forward. On a volunteer basis, I've had the opportunity and the privilege to serve approximately 7 years on the City of Fort Pierce Historic Preservation Board, the City of Fort Pierce Planning Board. I've served approximately 5 years, capacity of Vice Chairman, and I've served approximately 2.5 years since its inception as the chairman of the City of Fort Pierce Parking Committee. The basis of my candidacy is I'm very concerned about where growth in the city is heading. As a member of the planning board, we've seen come through the city approvals for millions of square feet of industrial space, thousands of residential units in the western corridors of the city, development of the downtown area, development in the beach area, et cetera. There is a lack of proper conduits for infrastructure planning and handling this development moving forward. And I believe that we need an experienced hand of a business leader. Cumulatively, I've spent 15 years on City of Fort Pierce volunteer boards. Through that experience, my 28 years as a local business owner indicate that I have the ability to participate in the discussion and decision-making processes that are going to need to be taking place over the next several years in addressing the growth needs of the community. So once again, I thank you for the opportunity to participate in this forum, and I think that's it.
Okay, thank you. Opening statement, James Clasby.
Hello, and just wanted to thank you for the invite again to come to the League of Women Voters. I've been following politics for a long time, and I've always tuned in to the League of Women Voters when you guys stream it on Facebook. It is really neat and a good way to get information out to voters. My name is James Clasby, and I am running to be your next Fort Pierce City Commissioner in District 2. Now, I am a multiple generation Fort Pierce resident. I graduated from all area schools right here in Fort Pierce, Fairlawn, Lincoln Park, John Carroll. I went to IRSC. I went to FAU for my bachelor's degree in political science and master's degree in public administration. I currently work as a civics teacher at Dan McCarty, where I teach young children the fine details of civics. And I have also worked as a CRA project manager. I have worked as a facilities project manager and a construction project manager. I've had the privilege of serving as commissioner on the Planning and Zoning Commission. I have served on the Citizens Budget Committee, and I've served on the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. I feel that I am ready to serve my hometown, and I feel like I can be a great asset on the City Commission for everybody in the entire city. And I think that my skills will complement everybody else's on the board currently, and we will all get along great. I ask that you vote for me, James Clasby. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we move now to the questions. You have 2 minutes each. We'll start coming back to James Clasby. Fort Pierce is positioned perfectly to be a hub of import and export industry. What actions will you take to develop that economy in Fort Pierce?
Import and export. Well, the city of Fort Pierce, we have the greatest port that we have right now. There's a port master plan that's been made in 2020 by the county, and the county is the one that sets the future of our port. So I feel that my role as a city commissioner, I will be looking to make sure that we execute that port master plan with various zonings and other things that'll be coming through in order to fulfill the things that have already been master planned by many people that are much smarter than myself. So I think that that would be one of the most important things, that along with working with the county for the airport. But, you know, in our role as a city, I'm not entirely sure that I can say much else other than the fact that we have lots of areas that come in and out with import, export, port, airport, future interchanges that could be coming our way, all of which you need to have good coordination with the county and good working experience in this field. So.
Okay, Mr. Broderick, what actions will you take to develop that economy in Fort Pierce?
It's a great question. That function is already underway. The City of Fort Pierce Planning Board and the City Commission over the last 2 years have approved approximately 7 million square feet of industrial space in the corridor of 95 and the Turnpike. The footprints of those buildings are all 1 million square feet or 500,000 square feet. Those are distribution centers that are being set up for nationally rated tenants in the import, export, and distribution business. The reason that they're coming to locate here is the proximity to the port system, Tampa, and into the hubs of Orlando, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, et cetera. So Fort Pierce makes a perfect jump off point. So this initiative is already underway. The city, the port in Fort Pierce, of course, is going to become an integral link to support that. But the construction of this 7 million square feet of institutional space is already well underway. So the ability for the city to transition to a major import-export hub is not in the future. It is immediately at our doorstep, and it is already taking place. The airport is the largest municipal airport on the eastern seaboard, other than Miami. It has tremendous capacity for expansion, and it's linked. The one issue that's going to be an impediment to this potentially is the lack of workforce housing. This is an issue that I've been addressing at the planning board now for months, trying to work with the county and the city to resolve that issue. It could potentially stymie this growth. So it is all linked: import, export, space to accommodate those types of businesses, workers to support those types of businesses, and those businesses will not be able to solicit the employment base needed if we do not address, in addition to the space needs, is workforce housing for employees for those companies to locate here.
Okay, second question, coming back to Mr. Broderick. Fort Pierce received a $2.7 million state grant, primarily funded by the federal infrastructure bill, to redevelop the 8-acre Kings Landing site. Considering that location, what steps will you take to ensure that this project is developed with consideration for the environment?
It's a great question. I sat on the Historic Preservation Board and the Planning Board when that project was brought through the city processes, and subsequently the project was approved by the City Commission. There's multiple levels of concern relative to that project. Now, the economic impacts of that project are significant. The benefits to downtown, the benefits to the downtown business corridor, et cetera, have been studied by the St. Lucie County Economic Development Council. The numbers are staggering in a positive manner. However, there are drawbacks. There's a shortfall of parking of approximately 450 parking spaces, a contingent with that project, et cetera. Now, in discussions with the developer, I actually have the opportunity to speak with him quite regularly. It is his intention, after they get the site mitigated, because they're in the process of removing buried construction debris from the site now, it is his intention to move forward immediately with construction and coming up out of the ground. So I see no impediments at this point in time, with the exception of the mitigation of the site. Costs need to be dealt with, things of this nature that are going to be dealt with in due course. That $2.7 million project impact is going to be utilized to develop infrastructure, surface roads, et cetera, that are going to be massively impacted by this development. So it is at the point now where it is ready to go. It has all approvals needed. It is ready to come out of the ground as soon as the mitigation efforts are completed. And according to the developer who I spoke to as late as last week, He's indicating to me that mitigation should be completed by the end of November.
Okay, same question, Mr. Clasby, the consideration for the environment at the King's Landing site.
So first of all, entirely grateful for the grant that got put out there for that. That's just less money that taxpayers have to pay, which is beautiful. Local tax money. Of course, it still comes from tax dollars, but I love to see it come right here to Fort Pierce. Now, as far as environmental things for that project, I was one that was pushing online, in person, everywhere else. Of course, it's too late for this now, but I want to go ahead and get on the record that because one of the reasons I'm running is I want to make the city get better deals. I want to be a guy that's got the ability to actually ask for things from developers whenever we're giving out incentives. So I would have pushed for more off-site improvements, stormwater treatment areas and other things. I got the ability to tour Fort Myers prior to Hurricane Ian. Actually, the Florida Redevelopment Conference had a conference there, and I got a full tour of the Luminary Hotel. Beautiful hotel, same developer that they want to build Marriott here. And that at that particular site, Fort Myers required them to build this nice stormwater treatment area. And, you know, things like that are what the city should be pushing for. We shouldn't just take whatever's handed to us. We should actually ask for a couple things. Now that the project is completed contract-wise, you know, I'll be pushing to make sure that every aspect of the contract is held to, and that we get what we're paying for at this point and what we've been offered. As far as future environmental things, I'm for all over the place environmental, not just King's Landing, but all over town.
Okay, next question, Mr. Clasby. There are many areas of Fort Pierce in need of significant infrastructure improvements. Will you advocate for more infrastructure bill dollars to come to Fort Pierce? And if so, what areas do you think need it most?
Fantastic question. That is my #1 issue is infrastructure. It's the biggest buzzword in the entire state right now, but it doesn't reign more true than right here in Fort Pierce. And it takes no further than just to walk down a few neighborhood streets till you notice that there's potholes everywhere. And then whenever you dig down into the records of the road, you find that most of them are well over 10 years, well over 15 years old, and there's no real plan or funding to replace those roads. So I want to take a deep dive into our budget and make sure that we are prioritizing our current monies for infrastructure. That way we can ask for grants, because to get grants, oftentimes it's matching money. You have to have money and projects ready to go in order to apply for a lot of grants. And that will definitely be a priority of mine, to be pushing the city to prioritize infrastructure projects within our city, specifically within neighborhoods. My primary focus would mostly be for roads within the CRA area, because there's lots of special grants and other things that go along with that. But I will also be pushing for septic to sewer conversions and other sorts of funding that the Florida legislature and the federal government is willing to help us pay for, because any money that we can get from either the state or the federal government is good to me, as long as there's not a lot of strings attached. But, you know, we want to be able to leverage our current budget in the best way possible. And the best way possible is to make sure we have projects ready to go, and that we apply for grants before deadlines and we actually receive them. So I will use any lobbying abilities that I have as a city commissioner to help us get those grants.
Okay, same question, Mr. Broderick. Will you advocate for more infrastructure bill dollars? And if so, where do we need them most?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's a question that has been brought up in the planning board on multiple occasions. And the reason is that there's a crisscross effect between the city and the county. The city is approving projects for development throughout the city that are on county roads, where the county is responsible for improvement of those roads, et cetera, to handle the traffic counts that are going to be needed. One of the things that I specifically requested from the City of Fort Pierce Planning Department is that a joint task force be put together to analyze the infrastructure needs with the county, and then independently within the city itself to prioritize projects on an as-needed basis. And simply put, the funding of those, there are available funds through the state, available funds through the federal government, is that the city needs specialized grant writers to put together grant requests to secure funding for these projects. Now, my opponent and I do agree on one thing, is that the corridors of the city, surface roads, are in deplorable condition. The city put into place a conversion of septic to sewer annexation program several years ago that has been a failure. So clearly these programs need to be revamped to eliminate septic systems within the city from a biohazard scenario. Secondarily, we need to invest in infrastructure, locate funds to make improvements, to extend improvements to road systems, et cetera. The corridors coming into the city are a primary concern. Orange Ave, Delaware Ave, Okeechobee, et cetera. I would like to see private-public partnerships put together here to improve those corridors as part of infrastructure improvement, which will also benefit the entire business community as a whole, and subsequently make improvements for the entire citizenry of the city. So it's a multi-tiered approach, funding, prioritization, and cooperation.
Okay, thank you. Coming back to Mr. Broderick, statewide, Floridians are experiencing the crunch of rising housing prices and rents. Fort Pierce has a poverty rate that is higher than the average for a city of similar size. How will you address the need for housing for Fort Pierce citizens who cannot afford to rent or own a home here?
Two sources. The planning board has been discussing this extensively with the city planning department, and I've led that discussion on numerous occasions. I believe that there are two direct sources that we can improve workforce housing. Once again, I go back to my comment earlier that the economic development of the city will come to a screeching halt if the affordable housing problem is not addressed. One is that there's a tremendous number of infill lots located within the city. It would be my desire to see the city waive all impact fees and partner with the county to waive all impact fees. So development on those infill lots can happen at a much more cost-effective basis. However, there are strings attached to that. Clearly, if we're going to negate the payment of these fees to the city and to the county, we're going to want affordable housing constructed in those areas. The benefit here is not only to provide additional housing, but it also cures the infill or vacant lot problem that the city of Fort Pierce is currently dealt with or has in front of it. Secondarily to that is development. There was a project that came in front of the planning board just this past planning board meeting for the rezoning of a large tract of land down near the Lexus dealership off of US 1 and Midway. And the intentions there are to convert that into high density residential. And clearly the high density residential would support workforce type housing, affordable housing, that would also lend itself to provide workforce housing for all the industrial space that's being developed within the city. So there's direct linkage between all of this. Thirdly, is that we have large out-of-state developers that are coming in and building these massive commercial industrial developments in the western quarter of the city. I believe that they need to be paying into some type of fund to provide funding for workforce housing that is simply going to be a benefit to their operations as well. So seeking to partner with them as a third phase of this, I think would be very beneficial to the city.
Hey, Mr. Clasby, same question. How would you address the need for housing for people who can't afford to rent or own a home in Fort Pierce? Mr. Clasby.
My apologies. It's very difficult to adjust the price of housing without subsidizing it. The free market does dictate the price of houses. It's supply and demand. But I can say that we can increase the supply of housing. The city owns a number of surplus properties right now, and we could be partnering, having some developers that might come to the table, put them out to bid, require those developers that they will, if they purchase these properties from the city, they must build attainable housing that we can afford to purchase in this area for current residents. Also, one second. So selling surplus properties for attainable housing it would be my number one thing. And secondly, you know, the housing market, it's secular. So, you know, there could be a correction at any time, and we may not even be having this problem. I'm not banking on that, but I will say that I don't think that the government should really do much when it comes to that, other than maybe changing some zoning regulations to allow some people to build additional accessory dwelling units in their rear yard. The county is already doing this, and that would do something to increase the supply of housing, therefore reducing the price of it. Also, Sorry, my mind's a little boggled right now. I was out doing the JC Park build all afternoon, but I think that that's my main thing, is that we could get rid of a lot of our surplus properties and get it to developers that could then build attainable housing.
Okay, well, the next question for Mr. Clasby. Florida is receiving new residents at an extraordinary rate, and Fort Pierce has been attractive. What can the City Commission do to ensure that new residents don't result in development that is detrimental to the environment and results in overcrowding?
You know, I think that we have to be very weary of large developments out west on our western borders. My opponent there mentioned a lot of new development out that way. And, you know, we have to be very weary of urban sprawl and make sure that we're not developing faster than the infrastructure is in place. So those are all things that need to be thought out. And whenever I say infrastructure, I'm talking about environmental infrastructure as well as roads and everything else, because we can't just build. We have to make sure that we're building at a sustainable rate that we can keep up with as a city, because we are still a very small city. And that means that we don't have the workforce in our city hall that others do, nor do we have the budget. So we have to make sure that we are developing at a pace that we can keep up with. And I think that that's the most important thing of all with this.
Same question, Mr. Broderick. How do you ensure that new residents don't result in damage to the environment and overcrowding?
It's a great question, because that problem is already here. The situation is somewhat stark in my opinion. The city has approved approximately 10,000 residential units in the Jenkins Road corridor. 10,000 residential units most likely represent somewhere in the vicinity, if they all are developed, most likely represents about 20,000 person increase in population of a city that has a population base of 45,000 currently. When asked the planning director at 2 or 3 planning board meetings ago, if there's improvements planned in the Jenkins Road corridor, et cetera, we are aware that that's a county-owned road. We were informed that the county does not even plan on studying the traffic requirements in that area of the county until 2026. So there's a distinct disconnect with what is already taking place, what's coming out of the ground, what is proposed for future development, and the conditions that we find ourselves in now. A cornerstone of my campaign has been smart growth. Smart growth requires the ability to look into the future and speculate as to what those needs are going to be moving forward. I believe that based on my 28-year career in commercial real estate redevelopment and my 15 years cumulative time spent on city boards, brings me well prepared to address these concerns moving forward and work with our partners in the county to make sure that these conditions are being addressed, not in 2026, but currently. So the growth curve is not coming, it's already here, and we need to get out in front of that. And I would foster the concept of the City Commission leading the charge to get their department heads actively involved in this, solicit participation from the county to get them on board so we can address this from a global perspective and a 30,000 foot elevation to make sure that proper planning and infrastructure is put into place now.
Okay, next question, coming back to Mr. Broderick. If you are elected, what do you hope to accomplish in your first year in office?
Great question. I think the prior question addresses the growth issue. My seat on the commission would be focused intently on getting growth management under control. The city planning department has had 4 different directors in 5 years. We need continuity of growth planning in conjunction with the county. It's critically important. Item number 2 is to make sure that the relocation of the wastewater treatment plant stays on target. That project was approved by the planning board recently for the relocation of that to their new facility. It's queued up for the city commission at the November meeting. And speaking with the representatives of FPUA, their leadership team, they're indicating to me that potentially they may start coming out of the ground before or ahead of schedule. That's critically important. The growth needs of the city need to be addressed and need to be addressed now, because that bus has already left the station. So simply put, growth, Of course, the relocation of the wastewater treatment plant. Then, of course, environmental protection of the Indian River Lagoon is of critical importance. And that is not being addressed in the development schemes that are being put forward by the city currently. We need to enhance those provisions to protect the lagoon moving forward, especially in light of the fact of all the development that potentially is going to be taking place in town, out on South Hutchinson Island, et cetera. These controls need to be put into place now. And these have to do with biohazard separators, buffer zones, et cetera, to protect the environment, because there's multiple projects that are going to be coming in front of the city for approval in the very near future. So we need to get out in front of all this, because we simply are not at this point in time.
Mr. Clasby, same question. If you are elected, what do you hope to accomplish in your first year in office?
So if elected, my first year in office and every year after that, I will be asking the questions that are not currently being asked. There's a lot of things that are silent about, because I actually watch the meetings and I can tell, I always wonder, why didn't they ask this question? Why didn't they ask that question? There's a lot of things that could be asked. Okay, I'll dive deep into the budget. I'll make sure that infrastructure projects are being prioritized and that we are actually applying for grants and that we have projects ready to go in our city so we can keep up with some of this growth that I keep hearing about. Okay, I want to work closely with FPUA's leadership. And I had recently talked with them because the rates and things like that are currently in vogue to talk about, because it's affecting everybody. And I've talked with them and they're working on lots of things to help tighten their operating budget. You know, I'm going to push them on that and really challenge them to do that and tighten the belt, so that way they can make progress on some of those statements. I will also work to engage the public through social media, through town hall meetings that are actually fun and informative and actually bring people in. I will also work as, you know, I'm an educator and I'm learning every day about how I can better educate our youth. I will use those skills to better educate the public on all the affairs of the city and how they can be involved and help the city to get more public input and to make sure that we're going the direction that our community wants to go.
Okay, now our next question. We've touched on this a little bit, but if we can kind of summarize, Mr. Clasby, what policies will you implement to protect the natural environment of Fort Pierce?
What policies will I institute to protect the natural environment? I feel that our code has lots of policies currently in place. I think that I will make sure that we're enforcing development orders, that any sort of development orders that's out there, that we're making sure that they're putting in their hedges, that they're putting in all of the environmental parts that have been ordered, because I feel like a lot of times developments happen and things slide. And I want to make sure that we're not letting things slide. If things are ordered to be put in, we need to make sure they are. Also, I think that our code has ample environmental protections in it now. They just need to be enforced.
Okay, for Mr. Broderick, what policies would you try to implement to protect the natural environment of Fort Pierce?
This is one area that I differ with my opponent in that I believe that we do not have sufficient environmental controls in place for development. I would like to see, and with technology today, the enhancements that can be made for environmental protection on development is not overly burdensome as it has been in decades past. Unfortunately, the code within the city has not been updated in years. So simply put, I would like to see a complete rewrite of the environmental protection requirements of the city code that all development is going to have to meet moving forward. I'll give you one very simple example. If you're going to put in a new gas station today, you're going to have in the sewer catch basins, you're going to have to put in collection capability to separate fuel spills, et cetera, before they are able to get into the surface water system. The question I ask is simply, why can't we require those on all commercial development? If they're required in areas that we know are going to be affected by this, let's upgrade development to address all those. I have the opportunity to run through downtown several times per week, and at all the catch basins downtown, it has a little label on there that says, please do not put waste material down here. It drains immediately to the Indian River. Well, I believe we can do better than that. As a matter of fact, I know we can do better than that. The city needs to take the lead here to show private development that this can be done. There is federal funding available for this. There's state funding available for this. We need to secure that funding and let the city of Fort Pierce be a leader in this particular issue, and then bring private development along in that same fashion moving forward. But this needs to be implemented now. The Indian River Lagoon is suffering horribly, and we can do better privately, publicly, etc.
Okay, now we have a question from the Facebook audience. I'll come back to Mr. Broderick. How would you address the destruction of wildlife habitats that comes with housing and business development?
This is a very serious issue, and as development within the city is accelerating, we need to bring in outside experts that are going to mitigate these downfalls. Now, clearly, private property rights dictate that owners of property have the right to develop that with whatever the particular zoning classifications might be within those boundaries. Simply put, as part of my prior answer, we need to elevate our game, and we can certainly make Fort Pierce be a showcase for environmental protection and protecting habitat. If that requires setting aside tracts of land on development sites, or the purchase of protected lands to mitigate that. These are all things that I think need to be taken into consideration. We need to bring in the expertise into the city to address this in the planning phase, because it is not being addressed currently in any capacity. So simply put, we can do much better than we're doing currently. We need to staff up for that type of scenario, and there are a variety of commercially acceptable solutions that can be deployed immediately to address those needs.
Okay, same question to Mr. Clasby from our Facebook audience. How would you address the destruction of wildlife habitats that comes with housing and business development? Okay, Mr. Clasby?
Wanted to thank Natasha for that question, and thanks for watching the candidate forum. I think that the city, this is one of those instances where the city needs to do a better job at public education, because we are a growing city right now. As you've heard the planning board member on this Zoom say, that there's been lots and lots of development that's been approved. There's not much we can do about that because they've already approved it. Okay. Now, what the city needs to do is they need to do a better job of what our current code is and what the environmental protections we currently have, so that way it can let people that have concerns about environmental protection know that the city already has things on the books that require wildlife surveys, gopher tortoise surveys, scrub jay surveys. All of these things are required before you can clear land. It's also required that you relocate these animals if they are found. So there's a lot of standard development rules and environmental protections that are built in pretty much anywhere where you build in Florida. But as you've heard my opponent say, they have already approved lots and lots and lots of development. So there's not much we can do about that. Those animals will probably be relocated if found. So I want the city to do a better job and probably have some sort of PR piece if this large scale development is going to happen, showing what we're doing and what we do to safeguard our animals and our wildlife.
Okay, if we have no more questions from the Facebook audience, then we'll move to the closing statements. And Mr. Clasby.
So I'm a long time Fort Pierce resident. In fact, I was born here. 5th generation resident. In fact, I have done everything I can possibly do to educate myself about local government. Every single thing you can possibly do. I'm doing the right thing here. It's been a dream of mine to run for city commission in Fort Pierce, to represent my hometown for such a long time. You'll find very few people that are as knowledgeable as myself on city business, county business, state business, and federal politics. I have a complete picture of where everything is at, and I think that I can represent our hometown the best. You don't just learn some of these things, it's multiple generations of knowledge that I have. And I really feel that I can represent our hometown to make sure that as we grow, we're not forgotten about. Okay, there's lots of local residents here that are deathly afraid that we're just going to be steamrolled by new development and new people moving in. I'm here to tell you that we're not going to be forgotten. We are here, this is Fort Pierce, and we're going to be represented by me on the city commission if you elect me on November 8th. And I really ask that you do vote for me, James Clasby, on November 8th. You can find more information about me on my website at jamesclasby.com. I also have a Facebook page that I'm very active in, my campaign page. You can find it at facebook.com/JD Clasby. My phone number is 772-971-1090. Feel free to give me a call at any time and I'll answer any questions you have directly. Thank you.
Okay, closing statement, Michael Broderick.
First, I'd like to thank the participants here for inviting me to this forum tonight. I have several comments. One is that I have been, unlike my opponent, I have been involved in local governance through my volunteer efforts through the City Planning Board, Historical Preservation Board, and the City of Fort Pierce Parking Committee. I am going to deviate from my standard closing comments as there has an issue that has come up in the campaign that concerns me greatly. At a forum that I attended with Mr. Clasby 2 nights ago, what question from the audience came up relative to participation by each of us in city committees and boards. Mr. Clasby has zero experience participating in any City of Fort Pierce boards or committees. I gave the litany of my background on the Historic Preservation Board, the City of Fort Pierce Planning Board, and the Parking Committee. When Mr. Clasby was asked to give his response, his comment regarding the Planning Board was, "The Planning Board is unnecessary and part of red tape and for political gain for some." That's a direct quote, and it's recorded. So he can try to refute that, but that's in the recording that he's displaying on his social media. In addition to that, my opponent has also commented in a public forum that it is his interest to disband the City of Fort Pierce Parking Committee. Now, I question the reasoning behind eliminating volunteer effort, participating in volunteer boards that the City of Fort Pierce City Commission rely upon for information to percolate up to the City Commission. It is of a grave concern to me that his interest is saying that boards are basically useless and that other committees should be eliminated. So he advocates the involvement of citizenry in these boards and committees and activities, but he is actively commenting that their participation is not worthwhile or it should be eliminated in its entirety. I'm very concerned about that. I am a product of the board and committee system of the City of Fort Pierce, and I look forward to increasing the amount of participation that we all have with more people being involved moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. We have reached the end of the questions and statements of the candidate forum. Thank you both for participating. We thank the League members for developing the questions for this evening's forum. And certainly we thank everyone who is listening and watching for informing yourselves about the general election. And there are many opportunities with early voting and vote by mail. And there's always November 8th. It's always election day. So thank you for joining us, and we'll go back to Sabrina.
Thank you again, Carol, and thank you, Mr. Broderick and Mr. Clasby, for making time to certainly speak to the voters and the constituents, making sure that people have an opportunity to hear you all's platforms as they plan their vote. So making sure that not only do you plan your vote, but also understand that your vote is your voice. We thank you always for making time to spend time with the League of Women Voters, for support us, and please always be safe, be well, and good night.